Hello, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. It's Monday, July 17th. This is Africa 54. Kickstarting Chad development, the country consistently ranks among the bottom 5 of the United Nations Human Development Index with poor life expectancy, education and living standards. A Sudanese journalist flees the country's fighting with his pregnant wife. He tells us about their harrowing escape to Kenya. And scientists say the recent worldwide heat wave attributed to climate change is the hottest on record. We'll have a report. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. We begin in Chad, a country that consistently ranks among the bottom 5 countries in the United Nations Human Development Index with poor life expectancy, education and living standards. Henry Wilkins has more from N'Djamena.
In Chad's capital, N'Djamena, Ola Suleiman sits by the side of the road breaking rocks to sell for use in construction. She says life for her and her family is grueling, but she sees no other way to make a living.
It's very hard to live here with no money. My children cannot go to school to become well educated. We accept this situation as we don't have any other choice.
Chad, along with its neighbours Niger and Central African Republic, consistently finds itself at the bottom of the United Nations Human Development Index. The HDI was created in 1990 as a measure of a country's prosperity. It takes into account factors such as life expectancy, education and per capita income. Suleiman is not alone. 6.5 million Chadians live below the poverty line, a number that rose by 38% between 2011 and 2019, according to the World Bank. Omar Bourid, a mother of 4, lost her home to floods that devastated parts of Chad a year ago and now lives on a public soccer pitch in N'Djamena.
It's really hard to find a good job. People are suffering. All the people here are having a hard time.
While for decades, non-profits and development banks have been pouring money into projects to stimulate growth in countries like Chad, many in Central Africa question why there appears to be little progress. One economist says rising population is a major factor. Chad has a birth rate of 6.5 children per woman, compared to less than 2.0 in many developed countries.
Uncontrolled population growth is a recipe for entrenching poverty cycles and in fact creating more conflict in the future because the competition for resources becomes stronger and more acute the more people you have.
In Central Africa, conflicts over resources are becoming more common, many experts say, which in turn leads to more development problems.
A lot of those resources, the little resources they have, they need to invest in their army and in their security forces. So there's a question of what comes first, right? So does the government need to invest more in education and then less in its own security?
He added that the development efforts have been successful in African countries, such as Ivory Coast, as has localised development in Niger's capital, Niamey. But the slow pace of development in Chad means people like Suleiman suffer. She says she feels she has no chance at prosperity.
Of course I feel sick, especially at night. We are really tired and exhausted.
The experts VOA spoke to agree that harnessing the political will and mobilising entire countries to break these cycles is essential to solving development woes. Henry Wilkins for VOA News, N'Djamena, Chad.
The war between military factions in Sudan is threatening to drive the country deeper into hunger and poverty. The United Nations says the number of people going hungry in Sudan is likely to rise to 19 million by August from 16 million prior to the conflict. The worsening conditions for farmers indicates that a looming hunger crisis could get worse than the UN and aid workers have forecast. Violence has escalated in Darfur since mid-April. Lenny Kinzeli, the World Food Programme head of communications, says the organization is seeing record levels of hunger in Sudan.
Right now, we're looking at around 19 million people in Sudan that are facing hunger. Right now is actually what would traditionally be the lean season in Sudan. So from June to September is what we call the hunger season because it's the planting season. So farmers and people have harvested the crops from the previous season, and so there is typically less of food available in this season. So we're looking at around 40% of the population that would not know where their next meal is coming from.
Kinzeli says the most affected areas are in West Darfur, South Kordofan and West Kordofan. For more on the humanitarian crisis facing Sudanese citizens, I'm joined live via Skype from Nairobi, Kenya by Javier Castellanos, Undersecretary for the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies. Mr. Castellanos, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be with you, and a great pleasure to share any information.
Now, from what you have seen and heard, how large are the needs and how is the world responding? You just came back from Port Sudan in Sudan, where your organization is working. What is the situation there?
Well, the situation is a daring situation in terms of the humanitarian needs in the country. We know that the majority, we have over 2.3 million internal displaced people, and we have around 700,000 that have been fled to different countries. But if we go a little bit deeper, what we are seeing is a serious issue in terms of access to food, in terms of ensuring that the health services are provided, and there is a high risk that the health infrastructure will not be able to support for long term. There is lack of medicines in many places. The conditions of access to water in different places is extremely low or bad or has been totally interrupted. And you will have a serious issues of sanitation. And the issues of sanitation are going to bring another sort of humanitarian problems. And if we add this to the climate crisis, the already existing food insecurity, the coming floods, the socioeconomic impacts already of the crisis, what we are talking is a tremendous level of vulnerability and huge needs that need to be addressed in the country. The Sudanese Red Crescent Society is operating in the 18 states. And you see in front of you the different pictures of the work of the National Society, but the needs definitely compared that the available resources are definitely not met.
Mr. Castellanos, how are you managing logistics given the kind of picture that you've just given us? And are you able to reach people who are really in need in some of the far, difficult places to reach in Sudan given the ongoing war?
Well, let me start saying that the network of the Red Crescent Society is a network that is practically in every state, in every district, and in different local communities. And that allows to have always a member of the Red Crescent Society operating. We have so far managed to ensure that 20 planes have arrived with humanitarian aid, and we have managed to distribute across the country the humanitarian aid. We are in contact with different other organizations, starting with the ICRC, the International Committee of the Red Cross, with World Food Programme, with UNICEF, with IOM, and all the actors together, we try to put our part in order to ensure that we are able to deliver humanitarian services. Just to give you an example, more than 40 tons of food was possible to distribute inside Khartoum and other affected country places, thanks to the collaboration between World Food Programme and the Sudanese Red Crescent Society, where the volunteers are delivering humanitarian services at all times. We are providing the same services and in different parts of the states, and not only in the affected by the conflict, but also in those where there are significant level of internal displaced population.
Mr. Javier, thank you very much for what you're doing in Sudan to help those civilians that are in a dire need of aid. Javier Castellanos is Undersecretary for the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies. Sudan's neighboring countries summit meeting in Egypt last week rejected foreign intervention in the conflict-ridden country and urged immediate talks between the rival Sudanese military factions that have triggered a regional humanitarian crisis. Sudan's conflict has killed more than 3,000 people, according to data from June, although the actual death toll is likely much higher. Large numbers of Sudanese have fled to neighboring countries to escape the ongoing fighting, including a Sudanese journalist, Shakul Nyaketo. He fled with his pregnant wife, hoping to find a haven for his family. Shakul, alongside other Sudanese, walked for several days, covering hundreds of kilometers from Khartoum through the dangerous roads of Ethiopia, finally making it to Kenya. VOA Paul Ndiho spoke to Nyaketo, who shares his ordeal.
What's going on in my country, Sudan, is actually very terrible and very bad right now. There is a very dangerous war going on in Sudan. It was in Khartoum, but now has spread in different states in the country, in different regions. So there is a fighting between the Rapid Support Forces and the Sudan National Army Forces, or National Armed Forces. A lot of people have lost their houses, because of the fighting and the airstrike inside the city. The major effects is, the impact of that war is in Khartoum, because it has started in Khartoum and the war is still going on in Khartoum, especially yesterday, until yesterday, last night, and this morning. There is a very, much shooting inside the capital until now. So there is a very much humanitarian crisis going on in there.
What is it like leaving everything you've ever owned, you've ever known, to flee to a different country?
It's a very unfortunate feeling, and it was not very easy. I was very traumatized and felt alone, because as a journalist, I was dreaming to start my own media houses. And of course, last year, I managed to start my own company, register the company, build the website, and bring the equipment. I have prepared the studio production. I think, what does it mean for somebody to start for 7 or 8 years saving just to start your own business as a young person? As I talk to you, I only moved, thank God, with my laptop. That's the precious thing I have, the laptop and the passport. There is nothing that can actually be, can get back after this war.
You left almost all your relatives, all your friends back there. Are they safe? Have you been able to talk to them?
I am able to talk to my friends. I talk to my family as well. We've lost some of relatives and also friends. But those who are alive, we are still in touch with them.
What can you tell us that happened to you? You had to leave with a pregnant wife. You had to walk to Ethiopia and maybe find your way to Kenya. How did you do it?
2 weeks after the war, intensive shooting in Khartoum, a lot of houses nearby us were destroyed and shot, and many people are leaving. Because as a journalist, by that time, I was not able to go and report on the ground. I'm just seeing what's going on. For me, it was a choice whether I stay or look after my family. So I decided to leave the country with my wife, and then it was very difficult. When we started evacuation, she was 7 months. Pregnant. So it took us like maybe 10 days to cross the 2 borders and then come here.
And congratulations on your baby.
I'm hopefully that I will tell him that you will be the next president of Sudan to so that I want him to be given a birth without tribe, without color, without support to any of those people. So I want him to be a Sudanese who will go back to the country in the name of the Sudan, and hopefully he will be the president of the next country.
I can't wait to see that young man come to life. Once again, congratulations, and thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you very much, Paul.
Great story there, Shakur. Very brave man. Shakur Nyaketo, a Sudanese national, speaking to VOA's Paul Ndiho. Russia says it has halted participation in a United Nations brokered deal which allowed Ukrainian grain to be exported through the Black Sea. Russia's announcement on Monday comes just hours after Moscow says Ukraine attacked the bridge connecting Crimea to Russia. The Ukrainian shipping deal had been scheduled to expire Monday. The deal brokered by the UN and Turkey last July aimed to alleviate a global food crisis by allowing Ukrainian grain blocked by the Russia-Ukraine conflict to be exported safely. Analysts believe the suspension of the grain deal, which allowed the safe export of grain from Ukraine for the past year, will hit poorer countries hardest.
Russia is the largest exporter of wheat in the world. It exports more than 20% of global wheat exports. And this means that those countries that might find themselves unable to import from Ukraine, they will be more dependent on those Russian wheat exports. And normally the wheat from Ukraine goes to very poor countries like Northern African countries, Sub-Saharan African countries, Middle Eastern countries. So yeah, those countries will really need to import more from Russia.
Mera says Ukrainian farmers will be forced to find alternative and more expensive routes to try and export to Ukraine. We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and all our VOA Africa programs on our website at voaafrica.com. Still to come, scientists say the recent worldwide heat wave is the hottest on record. Is climate change to blame? We'll be right back.
Health, wellness, sport, beauty, medical breakthroughs. Healthy Living cares about your well-being. What are the main health concerns in Africa and around the world? Find out the latest on coronavirus. Connect with our experts and ask them questions.
How long does the virus stay?
Join me, Lina Khmoudou, in Washington every week on Healthy Living, right here on VOA.
You're watching Africa 54 from the Voice of America, coming to you live from Washington, D.C. In other African news, the United Nations Children's Agency says at least 289 children are known to have died in the first half of 2023 while trying to cross the Mediterranean Sea to Europe. That figure is double what it was recorded in the first 6 months of 2022. UNICEF estimates that over 11,000 children have arrived on the shores of Italy and from North Africa since January. A Northwest Cameroon regional governor says gunmen killed 10 people and injured 2 at a busy junction in the city of Bamenda. Aldolphe Lele Lafrique says a manhunt is underway for the assailants responsible for Sunday's massacre. The attackers ordered people onto the ground with accusations of failing to back local separatists, according to a witness. And South African President Cyril Ramaphosa is welcoming the opening of a new Huawei Innovation Center in Johannesburg. President Ramaphosa is praising the Chinese company for its confidence in the South African economy and its potential. Ramaphosa says that adopting Huawei's new technologies will help Africa jump into the fourth industrial revolution. Climate scientists say recent weeks have been the hottest worldwide and likely the hottest in the past 100,000 years. For oceanside tourist destinations, the effects of climate change threaten both their existence and ways of life. VOA's Arashar Basadi has more.
A roaring wildfire charred forests and homes on the Spanish island of La Palma as gusts of wind helped fan the flames. Authorities there say more than 4,000 people have been evacuated while Europe grapples with a heat wave. As many as 61,000 people may have died in sweltering heat on the continent just last summer, according to a recent estimate posted in the journal Nature. In India's capital, record rainfall plunged roadways underwater. New Delhi is in its typical monsoon season but has seen an atypical rainfall nearly 10 times what's expected for this time of year. In the northeastern United States, heavy rains washed away roads, forced evacuations, and grounded airplanes. The storms hit parts of New England, New York, and Connecticut, with some areas reporting rainfall north of 10 centimeters. It is against this backdrop that we go underwater on the coast of Florida, where scientists say extreme temperatures wreak havoc on coral reefs and entire marine ecosystems.
In addition to having extremely high temperatures on land, we're also having really high sea temperatures. And so some of our long-term monitoring sites here off of Miami are starting to show signs of early coral bleaching. So they're starting to pale and losing their their algal pigments, and eventually we expect them to bleach fully.
The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, describes coral bleaching as coral expelling its symbiotic algae amid external stressors like change in water temperature. NOAA says in 2005, the U.S. lost half of its Caribbean reefs in 1 year due to bleaching. But the scientists working on a project to restore the reefs say they see signs of hope in an unlikely place, along the waterways where giant cruise ships line up at a terminal.
So we're deep inside the port right now, and it's generally extremely turbid, warm, water sits here for a long time, so not what we would think to be a pristine coral reef habitat. But along this stabilized shoreline here where we have riprap or large boulders, we have corals that have settled and are thriving. These corals are some of the healthiest that I have seen all over Miami, and they grow incredibly large and seem to be healthy.
Scientists say this new technique of breeding and transplanting healthy coral could be the key to supporting their viability before reintroducing them into the ocean. Experts say coral reefs create homes for millions of species, encourage healthy marine food webs, and protect coastlines. They are also a tourist attraction that supports local economies in America's Sunshine State. NOAA recently reported Florida water temperatures of 35 degrees Celsius compared to what has typically ranged between 22 to 31 degrees Celsius. Arash Arabasadi, VOA News.
Washington, D.C.'s metro trains and buses have transported people in the U.S. Capitol for over 50 years. Lately, electric bikes and scooters have taken over as the easy and, for some, an exciting way to get around town. VOA's Anthony Labruto takes us on a ride around Washington.
They're everywhere in Washington, from offices to the National Mall, and even in front of museums. Move over Metro.
Take an e-bike or scooter instead. These e-bikes and scooters are all around Washington, D.C. They're a fun and affordable way to get around.
Simply download a participating app like Lime and scan the QR code.
And just like that, you're ready to go. No need to do any hard pedaling. Let the electricity do it for you.
For Emily Gotlick and her puppy, traveling around by electric scooter for work or grocery shopping is a great alternative to driving.
It's a lot faster and I don't have to pay parking fees, so I just take this, go to work, go home.
While many prefer renting scooters whenever they need to get around, Emily decided to buy one.
It's a very worthwhile investment instead of renting them all the time. If I was going to use it every day, I'd just purchase one. Black Friday, got a good deal.
Emily's sister April, who's visiting the city, says riding a scooter is much better for her as a tourist than catching the bus or metro train.
It makes it much quicker than walking, and it's nice. You get a little breeze while you're riding around.
Renting electric scooters or bikes through Lime, Washington's most popular rental company, will usually cost around $4 or $5 US for short trips. For Lauren Copsey, owner and technician at the Daily Rider, a bike shop specializing in electric sales and service, electric bikes are heralding a transportation revolution in the Washington metropolitan area.
So in a city like Washington, D.C., we have a lot of customers who are relying on their electric bikes for transportation. And like this one that I'm working on right here, This one's used primarily for child carrying and for getting around town doing errands. We're seeing probably 20 or 30% of the bikes out there on the bike lanes are electric bikes, and that number is growing every year.
COPSI credits much of the rise in popularity of scooters and electric bikes to the city's willingness to invest in non-car infrastructure.
When you see the person out on it, you know that the infrastructure is starting to come along, because when you see someone who is confident enough that they can ride in the city with a child and use it as their primary transportation, you know that they've had an infrastructure win. If we prioritize for one type of transportation, then that's what the result that we get.
According to company data, Lime operates around 5,000 scooters and electric bikes across Washington, with plans to add more. If you do plan to use an electric bike or scooter, beware of distracted drivers and always remember to wear a helmet. Anthony Labruto, VOA News, Washington.
And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.
MONUSCO cannot and should not stay in the DRC indefinitely. But there is broad consensus that the DRC government will have not met the benchmarks it agreed upon as the minimum conditions for MONUSCO's drawdown by the end of 2023. A precipitous withdrawal of MONUSCO would likely leave a security vacuum that state authorities are unable to fill, with devastating effects for the region's most vulnerable populations. The humanitarian crisis is also worsening due to the continued violence, resulting in 1 million internally displaced persons, an appalling escalation in gender-based violence, and immense human suffering. In order for the mission to succeed, it deserves this council's support and that of the DRC government. The people of the DRC deserve peace. The United States stands with them in their pursuit of a better future.